and welcome back to Tai'Shar Manethrin, Wheel of Time
Welcome
podcast.
back indeed. Yes.
I'm Sam.
I'm Will. Sorry I interrupted you, Sam. I was just so excited to be back.
It's been we've been away for a while and had some stuff going on in our lives. I was actually just telling my 4-year-old that I need him to go to sleep because I have to podcast. And he said, "Do you have a job?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, but it doesn't pay anything." And he said, "What?" So we're back to our non-paying job. It's nice.
Yeah, in the meantime, I learned how to build a model of the Eiffel Tower out of Belgian waffles using YouTube tutorials.
Delicious. I would eat it.
Yeah, well, I haven't built it. I've just learned how to do it.
So that's a good call. You take notes and watch videos. It's a relaxing experience, I think.
Theoretical knowledge really is the best kind of knowledge. That's at least what every discussion on Reddit, I think, has taught me.
Right. I think most discussions on Reddit are like creative writing students that are doing an assignment of some kind. Like, I'm going to pretend to be an expert on frogs or whatever.
Yeah. Actually, it is kind of a fun challenge. Yeah. Decide you're an expert on something. Go on to Reddit and then just jump right in there.
And assert yourself as an authority, even if you are not.
Okay. Well, it's good to be back.
So, we're slogging. We are gonna do the slog, ladies and gentlemen. You asked, we listened. We are diving into A Crown of Swords today. We're excited about it.
That sounds painful. Diving into A Crown of Swords sounds pretty painful.
Yeah, it's something. It's not going to be quite that painful, but that is quite an image. Now that I stop and think about it, mixing metaphors can be dangerous. Anyway, so Will's going to take us away on this first leg of our sloggy journey. So whenever you're ready.
Absolutely. Well, as we have talked about, I think for a while now, one of the services that we're looking to provide kind of a bit of a advice on what parts of the slog that you could skip, what parts maybe you should skim, and what parts you still should read. And so,
there's certainly as I get in deep into this book, it's like there's some genuinely good stuff in here. Like it's sort of like nuggets of gold amidst the chaff or whatever the word might be. And I think this is a good approach. Like, there are chapters that are complete fluff and like you can listen to us kind of talk about it a little bit and then just not miss a thing. There's chapters, it'd be good to kind of like know sort of like sketch of what happened. Maybe read the wiki, I don't know. And there's some you should definitely read.
With that said, we're starting with the prologue, and the prologue is really several chapters. It's always several chapters kind of crammed into one. And then it's funny to me, because there are so many books you read where there's a prologue and the prologue is usually like a couple of pages, or it might even be something that is completely skippable.
Yeah.
In this series of books.
In Robert Jordan's case, they're novellas.
Yes, exactly.
They're a series of short stories.
Right.
Anecdotes, if you will.
So for the case of the prologue, I've actually broken this up into the various sections, kind of the subchapters, based off of whose perspective it is. And within that subchapter, I've made a recommendation on whether it's a read, a skim, or a skip. So right at the beginning, the first one is an Elida perspective, and this one is a read.
Yeah, you should definitely read the first part, the very beginning of the book anyway. It's like, It seems like this is what he very first, you'd think, maybe it's what he first wrote, maybe it isn't, but it's definitely got some stuff in there.
And this section, Elida is chilling in her study, which is not the usual Amerlin study. She's moved to a room higher up in the tower with a better view. She's watching the construction of her palace. Yes, her palace, even though the world is ending. Elida is using tower resources to build a palace, which she says will be 30 spans taller than the White Tower itself. And to me, it sounds like Elida has tower envy.
Yeah. Spend a lot of time and energy on the thing. So
right, absolutely. Well, and of course, the tower was built by Ogier masons, and she actually tried to reach out to the local Ogier steading, and they're like, nah, we good. they didn't want to help.
Right. Like, this is not a worthy cause. Sorry. We're not interested. There's a lot going on at home right now. Got yard work to do.
Exactly.
It's a crazy time.
Right. So she's upset about that, but she's moved on and just hired a bunch of men who don't sound like they're super confident that they can build something to rival the White Tower, but
right. Like, they saw the architect's plans and are like, so what now? Excuse me?
So she reads a message from Galena, which says, "The ring has been placed in the bull's nose," and giggles to herself. Elida is reviewing her plans, we including needing several years to get the world back in order. And, she's talking about how there's going to be this last battle coming, and it's hopefully going to be years away, so that when it comes, she can just drop off Rand at Shale Ghul like a kid at a play date.
Just picture like dropping off somebody like that's on drugs in front of the hospital and just peeling out.
Right. Yeah. Just kind of give him a firm kick out of the side of the van. The ring has been placed in the bull's nose, of course, refers to Galena having successfully captured Rand. But of course, this information is a little out of date now. And poor Elida is not.
It just hasn't kind of quite gotten a note about Dumai's wells yet. I mean, you can figure why Galena might not be super interested in sharing that information, or also may have not had a chance.
Right, probably not yet. Alviarin shows up and begins a report explaining all the latest news. The Grey Ajah's eyes and ears have sent a report that the Supergirls are in Abu Dar, and Elida says that's absurd because Tarna Fair just reported that they were still in Saladar and she just got back. At this point, Elida does know about Rand having rediscovered traveling, but it hasn't occurred to her that perhaps some other people may have also rediscovered
her
traveling.
Adversary, the rebel Aes Sedai. Whoops.
Yeah.
How inconvenient.
Yes. Then Alviarin calmly explains the fact that there was a drawing with this message, and clearly Nynaeve and Elaine are recognizable. And Elida feels
held that detail back until the very end.
So Elida's embarrassed, and she's angry that Alviarin withheld that so that she could just make her feel stupid. The big takeaway about everything here is that Elida believes all the wrong rumors, and she's just basically wrong about everything. She believes Morghese is dead. She believes Mazrim Taim is dead. She doesn't believe that there are but a couple of men who can channel at the Black Tower.
She basically doesn't believe any fact it's like inconvenient to her like way of seeing the world.
Absolutely.
Bit of a flat earther,
too. Absolutely, she would be. Yeah. Yes, she doesn't believe the Forsaken are loose. She doesn't believe that the Saladar army is as big as it is. And of course, she thinks that Rand is with Galena.
Yeah, because she has a letter that says the nose has been placed in the, I don't know, was it an ox
bull's ring?
Yeah, whatever it was, yeah.
At the end of the report, Alviarin mentions just kind of, super casually, Saladar Aes Sedai are marching this way and have chosen Egwene Alvir as their Amelin. This is definitely the thing you kind of buried your lead there, Alvi.
Yes, you should have brought that up quicker.
But Elida, instead of being angry at her, just laughs uproariously at this, and it's just like,
"Wait, what's going on here, Elida? What's you laughing about?"
Right? You okay there? Elida's like, "Oh, you don't see it," and Alviarin's like, "I see enough, mother." And Elida explains something that actually may kind of give us a reason as to why the Saladar Aes Sedai agreed to make Egwene Amerlin, which I kind of referred to this in a previous episode in our spoiler section. It makes it a little more credible to me that they would have gone with Egwene, because otherwise it seems like, yes, we kind of get the drift that they wanted somebody, they were hoping for somebody that they could puppet, but even
and
still,
they also didn't want to stomach any of the rest of, like, Lelaine didn't want Ramonda and Shiriam, and vice versa. All of them didn't want the other ones to be Amerlin.
Just the whole time, the idea of putting an accepted in the Amerlin seat still kind of strained credulity to me.
It felt like just plot, for its own sake kind of thing. Until this, yeah.
But right here, Elida explains that the only crime in the White Tower that demands stilling, all the others may suggest it, may result in it, but the only one that, without question, if you're found guilty, you have to be stilled, is falsely claiming to be the Amerlin seat.
Right.
And so,
like, Shiriam, Lelaine, and Ramonda are like, yeah, I don't want to do that, just in case this doesn't work out. And you could definitely see that being true from at the very beginning, at least. So, like, this might be, ironically enough, this might be like one example of Elida jumping to a conclusion that was maybe accurate to some degree.
Right. And she says that if they believe their cause to be anything other than hopeless, they wouldn't have been offering Egwene up as a sacrificial lamb in hopes, that the rest of them might have a chance at regaining their place in the tower after everything goes back to normal.
Sure. Yeah.
So shortly after this, the foretelling takes hold of Elida, and she says, "The White Tower will be whole again, except for the remnants cast out and scorned, whole and more powerful than ever. Randall Thor will face the Amerlin seat and know her anger. The Black Tower will be rent in blood and fire, and sisters will walk its grounds. All will love me and despair."
Indeed.
And remember, reader, these things always happen.
Exactly, they do.
Alviarin is shocked.
Right. It's like the first time she's like actually been taken off guard in this whole thing. Just like, whoa, foretelling.
Because on top of being Aes Sedai, who typically are relatively calm, or collected, she is white, so she's like the spot.
Logic,
Aes Sedai.
Dispassionate,
right?
Live long and manipulate.
I like that. Mashing up Pon farr with the test to become a full sister somehow. Elida's super happy at the fact that she managed to knock Alviarin off of her, her mojo, whatever. And the chapter ends with Elida thinking that when history of the last battle is written, that she would be the most important part of the story, and her name will be written above all others, and she'll be remembered as
this sort of just does make me wonder, like, how can they tell real foretelling from just like, I want this to be true? Like, if she could use that echoey voice to be like, today we will have a pizza party. I mean, like, what's to stop her from just saying whatever she wants and be like, I'm foretell? Like, I guess it's the echoey voice. I don't know that she could manage to like fake that.
I guess if you foretold a pizza party that didn't come true, then people would be like, maybe she doesn't have the foretelling.
Don't have the foretelling after all. You would discredit yourself. Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly.
But you would just have to make sure the pizza was on its way. You'd already called Domino's, or I don't know, the end down the road, whatever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, what you're really showing me here is that there is no mention of pizza in the whole Wheel of Time.
That is a good point. That is, there's not. There are other authors that, like, I don't know if they write when they're hungry, but there's a lot more kind of vivid descriptions of food, and there are some here. It's more like various wine punches that we hear about more often than food. Like, we don't hear about big banquets as often, and like they just don't have time to have banquets very often in these books. Like, they're always going somewhere, or skirt smoothing or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that I hadn't thought much about that. You don't have quite as much description of food as you do in
I think about did you ever read Redwall?
I never did.
The mouse books, quote unquote. The Brian Jakes is about like mice with swords and stuff, and they would have these big feasts, and they would describe and you could almost make the food based on the descriptions of it. Anyway, it was I always just figured whoever that dude was really hungry when he was writing those scenes, or else he really wanted to be a chef and another life or something.
This is calling.
Like Robert Jordan, choreographing these ancient dances.
Right. Exactly. As we know, Elida is she's just the worst.
Oh, yeah. But so annoyingly incompetent.
I do think it's important to pause here for a moment, though, and consider that this isn't just foolishness. I mean, it is, but it principally is confirmation bias.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I was just thinking about how we read these books, and I mean, all of us read these books, and we hear from everybody's perspective. We as readers tend to have a feeling of superiority towards the characters.
Yeah, the third
because
person limited is often not that limited. Like he usually holds to it pretty well within a scene. But unlike other authors, Jordan doesn't have any compunction at all for about jumping from one character to another between scenes. And then
Right.
and even like having perspectives of characters that you are like throwaway characters or randomly perspectives on a character you never see. So we do get like we jump from place to place. We get information faster than any of the characters in the story do, or like the creator or something. Even more so, the dark one's not even as much in the know as we are often enough. And that's part of the problem with the slog, really, is that we just know too much so often, and so often it's characters going, "That happened," and we're like, "Yeah, that happened like 2 books ago. Get with the program here." Like,
right. Well, I mean, even the first, I don't know, quarter of this book is kind of still catching us
so
up.
much, yes. So many chapters are like these characters are meeting up in Tel'Raniad and talking about stuff we already know. Like, great. Thank you for catching each other up. Couldn't that have been a throwaway line, RJ?
Sometimes it's true. Characters aren't as smart as we are. They're irritating or they're making frustrating choices. But I think I just want to point out that Elida doesn't know what we know at this point.
Sure, yeah.
So she's going off of her experience, and she believes what she believes based off of her life experience. And we know that she's at least a generation older than Moraine and Swan, because
she's
was
been
already
involved in like stealing or gentling a lot of men. It sounds like she kind of talks about that in her perspective. So you can sort of see why she has so much bravado or confidence in herself and like her ability to lead. Like it kind of like it is misplaced certainly in this and now, but it definitely makes sense.
And she's also managed to angle herself into some powerful positions. I mean, obviously the Amerlin seat. I mean, she managed.
And before
to do
that, she was advisor to the Queen of Andor, which was a pretty lofty position as positions go in the Aes Sedai world. It's not, the Panarch of Tanchico, it's the Queen of Andor.
Yes.
Like, pretty big deal. It's a big place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we want to kind of just assume she's an idiot at sometimes. But I think the reason why I pause to say this is that, we as readers we're essentially omniscient to this world.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
We get to see what a person who assumes they're in the right and is working on the information they have based on the view they've cultivated, making a list of wrong assumptions.
Yeah.
And I think that's very realistic, and I think it's important to notice because, and to apply some of this to our own lives, we're all capable of being Elida in that way.
You get on Facebook, you see like an article, and you immediately look at like one maybe who posted it or like who it's directed toward, and you just make a judgment based on your like the filter that you use. Either side would do that, like whatever your affinities are.
Right. When you're reading a book, you're because you are omniscient and you're seeing it in you're seeing it at least the way the author intends for you to. So you feel like you're seeing it in a more objective way. Well, I think we kind of tend to assume we see the world objectively, and as a result,
in the world, there's not an actual, there's not a dark one who's affecting the world, and dark friends have allegiance to him. So it's just not quite as obviously clear cut in some cases.
Right. Yeah. It's not nearly as black and white or shadow and light.
Even though narrative, our narrative would have it to be, but it's not.
We're each more like one of the characters in this book that doesn't have all the information, but instead has prejudices and sources of information that we trust and others that we don't trust based off of past experience. And I'm not angling for a political point here. I thought it just struck me listening to this because we all tend to give Elida a hard time because she is the worst. But I think we could miss the point of characters like her if we always assume that we wouldn't make similar decisions faced with the same experience. I mean, you think about Elida having had a whole lifetime, potentially. I mean, we're not sure how old she is at this point. I guess you can look it up in the wiki. I don't care. But, she could be 100 years old. And
right, exactly. Yeah.
in which case... all of the view that she's had has really been cultivated over multiple lifetimes. And so a lot of what she's assuming really a generation ago may have been absolutely the way things would have worked out.
Yeah, I mean, like the whole basis of the Red Aja, the fact that now Rand has the amnesty and the Black Tower is a thing, but the Reds are still devoted to finding and gentling every man who can channel, and it's like their very kind of reason for existence is in question, and she just doesn't won't accept that, doesn't get that. Doesn't make sense to her from her perspective.
I try to think that way when I run into people that have a vastly different view than me. I mean, especially if it's somebody who's of a different generation. It's like, well, I mean, there may have been more to do with their life experience than I'm willing to give them credit for.
Yeah, and I think just having that idea in mind from time to time and being willing to be a student even later in life and being willing to learn is in and of itself a superpower, being able to be flexible and change with the times, but not change in the wrong way. It's like knowing the right times and the right ways to change is something it's easy to lose. I think as we get older, it's easier to become more rigid and kind of set in our beliefs.
Thanks for coming to our TED Talk. All right.
Distracting out as far as we can there.
Well, it's interesting.
It is. I think it's a good way to think about Elida. I liked that.
Yeah. Part 2 of this prologue is Savannah's perspective. I'd say this one is worth a skim.
Awful 2-bit villain.
Yeah.
It's just like we're checking in with all the awful 2-bit villains that you just know in the long run they're just going to get their comeuppance, and it's just, I mean, that's not a spoiler. That's just like you read it for the first time and you think, Savannah's not going to really accomplish her full plan and just come out on top and lead the world. Like, that's just not how this is going to play out, So why are we wasting time on this?
And I feel like, just because you mentioned it's not really a spoiler to point out the obvious, we had somebody comment on a iTunes review that, hey, we say that we're relatively spoiler free, but it's not really. I appreciated the review in that he was fair. He complimented us. He said, here's my one issue. And I do want to address that. And I think going forward, we may occasionally just kind of reinforce, hey, here's what we mean when we say, we're spoiler free, is that if something is going to really mess up your experience of reading the book, we're not going to reveal it in any way.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah.
However, if something is obvious, because if you're paying attention at where something is headed, then we may kind of agree with what you probably are assuming.
Right. That's my thought. It's like, this is not something, it's been so long since I've read these books that I literally can't remember exactly how Savannah's story plays out. For example, you just have this intuition based on the character and the other characters in the book series that one way or another, it's just not going to work out. And that's an example where I would say it's not a spoiler at all to say my intuition as someone who hasn't read these books since, I don't know, 2005 or 6 or something like that. It has an awful memory anyway, is that it's not going to work out for her. And I don't feel bad at all saying that. I don't feel like it's a spoiler at all. It's just like, come on, guys, how do you really think this is going to end? This is not George R. R. Martin. Look at how the story has played out so far. You've had one major good character die. That's it. After all these huge battles, that's not the way this guy writes. That's not what we're here doing.
Yeah, it's like somebody watching a TV show and one of the main characters is in danger and you're genuinely worried that they're going to die. And it's like, no, that we would have heard about that actor leaving the show. Anyway,
so
sorry.
True. That's a good sidebar though. I agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly.
And to put more concrete, kind of thing on it. So if you haven't seen Avengers Endgame and you don't want it spoiled, I'm about to spoil it in a major way to give you an example.
Sorry, it's been out for a year and a half. We are not worried about spoiling. Maybe the day or week after on Facebook, Chase.
Sure.
Don't spoil Avengers.
For real. I say a solid 2 weeks. Is kind of the courtesy. If I were to say Iron Man dies then that's a huge spoiler. If I were to say Iron Man is in Avengers Endgame, I'll even go as far as to say, because they're kind of acting like they're going to fake us out that he was going to die in the first few minutes.
Yeah.
If I even said he survives past the first 5 minutes, I don't feel that that's a spoiler. And so,
no, not at all. It doesn't give away the whole movie. Not at all. If I was to say this is what happens to Sivana or something referencing specific events about her character arc in the last few books, however long it is, then that would be a spoiler. But I am, as a second time reader 15 years later, also speculating with a little more background knowledge, but in general, come on.
Yeah. Part of this is if you're the kind of first time reader who genuinely doesn't want to know anything, then you probably shouldn't listen to any podcast.
Just read the books. They're great. Read them.
So anyway, we're taking a lot of tangents, but
that's okay.
This segment, like all of Savannah's perspectives from here on out, honestly, not all that important.
Nope.
It's especially since this one, this one's basically a recap anyway. This section is the Battle of Dumais Wells from the conclusion of the previous book, but from Savannah's perspective.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird to go back in time a little bit, to like suddenly, be back at Dumais Wells and seeing it from her perspective. It is kind of like, well, that's we've already seen this before. That's going back in time a little bit. Okay, sure, whatever.
Right. Yeah, this one's already been spoiled for us by the previous book. So,
yes.
There's something mildly satisfying about the latter part of this because of, her kind of getting beaten back a little bit.
Yeah,
but
she doesn't like really learn a lesson or anything. Like,
no, she never
just
does.
Like increases her resolve. Like, well, this is just a minor setback. All my people are getting slaughtered. Who cares? I'll still accomplish my goal of, marrying the Dragon Reborn or whatever.
Exactly. And so it's more just, there's not a lot of information. It's frustrating how nonsensical Savannah's plans are.
Yes.
And it does further explain that.
It's just like her saying, the Kara Karn is kind of hot. So I'm going to make sure that he rules the world and that I marry him. Like, that's the extent of her plan.
But somehow he's going to do everything she says, and like there's
that's important. Key point.
Yeah, and there's no reason that she doesn't have a plan as to how she's going to make that happen. She can't channel. And so she
happens to have a lot of channelers in the Shido, and some of them are really powerful, as we later learn.
Right.
But she can't channel a lick, and she just is, kind of forceful personality kind of thing, and was married or was betrothed to Muradin, and then of course Couladin, and so she's just kind of fallen into management, so to speak, and is not giving it up.
I think it's important to note the difference between Elida and Savannah. In this case, is Elida worked hard to get where she was versus Savannah just kind of fell into it.
She kind of batted her eyelashes at Muradin and Couladin and kind of played them off against each other. And then when Muradin died, she was like, Couladin, I had you in mind all along.
Right. And then he gets killed off stage, by the way, still not over that.
Right.
And,
awful.
The wise ones think they're doing it because the Aes Sedai had killed one of the wise ones. They think they're fighting the Aes Sedai. But that was actually
had her killed.
Right. And
just manipulating everybody all along the way.
She's terrible. So anyway, when the wolves attack as well as the other Aiel and the other wise ones, it's funny that Savannah is surprised that other wise ones are fighting, even though she had convinced wise ones to fight.
Right. She's like, they're fighting too, but they're not allowed to do that. I mean, mine are, but that doesn't count, really. Yeah. She's surprised that someone else is breaking the rules. Like, oh,
exactly.
That's not cool.
And so
that was supposed to be my edge that I had, my advantage.
Right. The Shadow wise ones won't fight other wise ones, and because they're like, look, that's just a bridge too far. We're not going that far. Then we get a recap of the rest of the battle, including the invisible meat grinder sequence.
Right.
At which point everyone retreats, and Savannah keeps on trying to tell everyone to keep attacking, but eventually gives up. but not before once again thinking that she would have Rand and the Aes Sedai would bow before her. And we're just all left to imagine exactly how she is going to accomplish.
Question mark, profit.
All right. Yeah. Whatever. Then we get into the third part of the prologue. It's Alviarin's perspective. I say you just skip this one. You don't really get anything that's all
It's just like a recap of her conversation with Elida, and like, oh, remember, Alviarin is Black Aja, in case you forgot. I think that's the whole reason.
Right.
You know, like.
Pretty much. It reminds you she's Black Aja. It reminds you that Missana is in the tower, confirms that we were told that a couple of times in the last book. And it does tell you that, Alviarin notes that Missana is wearing a mask made of the power. And so she can't recognize her if she's just walking the grounds of the tower.
I will say this is like one of the few times we actually see a Forsaken for a long time in this book. So it's nice true. For that. Like it is until, it's a ways into it when we see any more Forsaken. And that's part of what makes it sloggy. Because it's like, all right, what are we doing here? What are the Forsaken doing? Come on.
Yeah, and in general, we don't get a lot about what Missana's doing in the White Tower.
That's true, yeah.
And even in this scene, there's not a lot kind of being. She doesn't say like, "Look, here's what I'm doing, and I need your help with it."
She's just like, "Tell me what that conversation was about," and child,
right? Just being a typical Forsaken, clearly enjoying being feared and very arrogant in her surety of the great Lord's victory and therefore her own. But we don't really learn anything all that interesting. At the end, Missana does show Alviarin how to make a gateway, but that's kind of it. So part 4, Pedron Nile and Eamon Valda's perspective, I kind of grouped these together because they kind of...
Yeah, sure. It's the same scene. It just jumps from one perspective to another. Yeah.
And I'd say this is worth a skim. It's important what happens here.
Something actually happens. Yeah, so it's worth at least kind of being aware of that.
Morghese is in the Fortress of the Light, and she's playing stones. And it starts out pretty slow. That's part of the reason why I say it's a skim and not a read.
Sure. Skim to the exciting parts.
That's when Abdal Myrna interrupts the fake spy master. After Morghese leaves, he gives a fake spy report and then just straight up stabs Nile.
Right. Yeah. It's like, wow, he didn't end up being just like a random character number 3 after all. He did something, slightly significant.
And then Eamon Valda enters and stabs O'Myrna.
Kill that dude. Yep.
And if you want to see a video approximation of this event, Google an SNL sketch called Dear Sister. I just pause this podcast and go watch it now. I'll give you a moment. I seriously, go watch it. So now that you have that image in your mind instead of this kind of really shockingly boring scene, actually.
Sure. Yeah, it's like more like White Cloak politics. Like, okay. Oh, we just don't care. I'm sorry.
Valda is threatened by Asanawa, who's the High Inquisitor, and I just
Valda's kind of just like, so I don't care.
Right, exactly.
And Asanawa was like, okay.
I really don't know what we're supposed to take away from that exchange exactly.
I don't either. Yeah, especially given what happens later in this book. Like looking, I won't say, but it's just like this is all just. Man, why would anyone care?
Either way, Asanawa wants Morghese to come to the questioners. That's about the only thing aside from Niall's assassination. So then we move on to the final part of this prologue, which I put as a skip. I know people hate Gawain, and he is annoying. This is a Gawain perspective. But even more than Elida, he's an example of someone working off of bad information.
Yes, so true.
The thing with Gawain that is really irritating is that people he trusts keep telling him the information.
It's just like, nope, I'm gonna keep believing my Facebook memes or whatever.
Right, exactly. And it just seems crazy that he won't even consider that he might
like he's a smart dude. Like, how could he's just really committed to this.
He is confident that Rand is responsible for his mother's death, and I'm reminded of sometime, I think it was in high school, when my dad told me that confidence is what you have when you don't have all the information.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
We catch up with Gawain, and the younglings as they're retreating from Demise Wells. As you may remember, he kind of saw the writing on the wall fairly early in the battle and was like, yeah, we need to get out of here. Gawain did figure out that for reasons that are unclear, Galena was going to have the younglings killed if the battle hadn't struck when it did, which doesn't seem to bother him nearly as much as it would if I were him.
He just kind of moves on from that. Like, okay, that was going to happen, but I got to deal with this now. So moving on.
Right. So some of his scouts ahead say they saw an Aes Sedai with a dead horse ahead of them, so they decide to go aid her. You know, the lady from that organization that almost had them all killed.
Yeah, you'd think that he'd be like, all right, we're getting the heck out of here. Let's go, you know.
You're right.
Whatever. But he's like, no, we'll help her out. Just
right.
Not Galena, you know? Or maybe she is. He doesn't know.
When Aiel attacked them, and Gawain does prove that he's a gifted swordsman, which I have never denied. You know, like, that's one of the things. It's like you really get a description, you know, that both he and his brother are actually really good in
right. It just like goes to illustrate how much better Matt is, like how great Matt is. It could beat them both with a quarterstaff.
Right. Precisely.
And it's fair. It's probably fair to say at this point, Gawain is better than he was then.
Right.
Behind the ears, Greenhorn before.
I think Gawain, he's a little like Tom Brady. He's a great quarterback, but that doesn't mean that he's also not a real crap muffin. So after a brief skirmish, the remaining Shido disappear, and they ride to where the Aes Sedai was, only to find the dead horse. True to character, Gawain takes out a baseball bat and just beats that horse for the rest of the series.
Oh yeah.
Hey, I'm full of them. All right. I really don't know what the point of this moment was. Like,
Nothing.
what and so that's why I say this. I mean, you can just skip it.
Yeah, I guess, you know, Jordan's like, we need to make sure Gawain is okay. So let's check in with him briefly. I don't know.
Yes.
It just gets back to the point that, like, Robert Jordan had writer's block and or did not know where he was going. So he's like, I'm just going to check in with all my characters. I'm going to keep writing, but just not always in a very directed way.
Right. Well, and when it's a character that you really like,
it's kind of okay.
Then you tend, right, that it's just like, hey, you're adding
so
texture.
And it's like, yeah, it's like fun. It's like, I don't mind that. Okay, sure, whatever. But yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to stop with just the prologue, so I'm going to give you chapter 1 here at the end. High Chaseline. Okay, I rated this one a skip. It could be a skim. I know. I mean, like, based off of what I just said, it has characters we like in it.
Yeah,
and so you may be interested in skimming it some more.
At least read the first few paragraphs to get the wind blew over or whatever.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, sorry, that's like sacrilege. So yeah, read that much at least. You got to get where the wind ends up, because otherwise, you know, what are you even doing reading Wheel of Time?
Exactly.
So yeah, there's wind blew somewhere from someplace, probably because I had too much quinoa and that always gives me gas. We're now in Perrin's perspective, as we said, following the battle. So we finally have caught up with where we were at the end of the last book, but really there's still some stuff we're going to come encounter that is still kind of catching up, even
it is. And then also we'll just do lots of characters catching up via dialogue. Oh my goodness, that happened. Oh, and then also just lots of, you know, like maids talking to Egwene, kind
of up to a place where we're getting totally new information, and yet it still isn't advancing the plot.
Nope.
Perrin thinks about the fact that on the calendar in the Two Rivers today is a holiday called High Chaseline. That sounds kind of like Thanksgiving. It's the idea that you're supposed to be thinking about all the good things from the past year, and you're not allowed to complain all day, because that would be considered like bad luck for the coming year. And if you do complain, then you'll get a bucket of water thrown over your head or something like that.
Ice bucket challenge, Thanksgiving style.
Yes, I think that's mentioned as a contrast to where he's sitting on a battlefield watching Shido guys shine, who are all naked because they don't have any white robes handy.
Because Robert Jordan, ladies and gentlemen.
Right. Yeah. If there can be a random naked person in a scene that doesn't actually, but is almost never even tangentially sexual.
Oh, that's true.
It's
That's a good
just
point. Yeah.
it's just there's a naked person there.
And a lot of times, like Perrin or whoever's like, cheeks redden, like looking away, like, no, this is not proper. This is not good. And there's a lot of that. Wait,
Right.
this does bring up something I was thinking about the other day. Okay, so we talked a lot about how the ladies in these books are, Robert Jordan set out to make them strong, empowered female characters, and he didn't always succeed. They do fall into these stereotypes sometimes. But I would just like to point out that in almost all of the romantic entanglements in these books are initiated by the women. And the men are just kind of like flustered and like, Rand in particular is like, oh, this is not right at all. First with Aviendha, he's like, oh, we should get married now that we did that, right? And then with Min, he's like, oh, but you're like my sister. Oh, no. But then he sort of gives in, when she forces it. And Elaine just kind of proclaims her love for him, and he's like still trying to like get over Egwene. So he is very much like the pursued in that situation. I mean, Matt, this whole thing that's about to happen to Matt later in this book is another great example of that. And I think it's something that's worth pointing out, that in the cases where, okay, so it is we've talked about this before, the fact that there are these this polyamorous, polygamous, whatever you want to call it, relationship with Rand and the three ladies is weird, and that doesn't really fit with the whole theme of the book. But in terms of female empowerment, I think they do kind of come out on top, because they are sort of like, listen, dude, this is the way things are going to be. You're just going to have to get with the program. And he is the whole time like kind of the bumbling, countryman that's like, oh, this is not proper at all. But I'm really, I really like you. And oh, this is nice. But also he's not the one that's like initiating it. And I don't know. I like that. I think that's it's something that pops up again and again. And you see that in this scene with Perrin, the guy shine that like are undressed, that are like, running around, and you sort of have these hints that they're very attractive, and Perrin's like trying to look at them in the eye, or not looking at them at all. And it's like it's a sort of an endearing trope that keeps coming up and again, right? That like, this female empowerment thing, that the men are generally not aggressive in that sense. And anyway, it's just something that I was thinking about I wanted to bring up.
Right. I see where you're coming from with that. I certainly agree that I think the intent there is always to put the woman kind of in the driver's seat of the relationship.
Yeah. And sure, Jordan is ham-fisted when it comes to like relationships in general in these books, and there's no doubt about that. But you can tell he's trying to do the right thing. I mean, like...
Yeah, as we've said many times, it makes you wonder about the relationship that he and Harriet had.
Indeed.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Perrin is very flummoxed by all these naked Shido guy shine, and the Aiel on his side are all sending these Shido over to bring him very trivial messages, just because they know that it's flustering him, and so that's kind of funny. And Perrin is also looking at the Aes Sedai, who are under guard by the Ashaman.
It's like he sees it as a bit of a powder keg, like, oh, this could go shape real quick.
And I mean, which is kind of carrying over from before the Battle of Dumais Wells, like when he was marching with the multiple armies and just kind of pointing out how all of these different groups don't really get along all that well.
And this was before the Ashaman were even like part of that dynamic. And now that they are, it's like, oh my gosh, what is going to happen is what he's thinking. Like this could get real bad real fast.
So you have a lot of diametrically opposed groups that are supposedly on the same side at the moment, right after the heat of battle. Things are a little crazy. Aram walks over, Tinker with the sword, and says, in regards to the Aes Sedai, we could just kill him. Might be doing Rand a favor.
He's like, dude, not cool.
And Perrin's like, you need to stop talking.
Right. Stop it.
Actually, others kind of start to suggest the same thing. Like, hey, we could just murder him, and it wouldn't be all that bad for Rand, since obviously the Aes Sedai aren't exactly on his side. Exactly. Even if they claim that they are.
What are we, the Dragonsworn Mafia here? Jeez, guys.
And it does emphasize here, like we're saying, the tension in the air. And in this case, of course, Perrin literally smells the tension in the air. I think we spend like 2 pages describing smells here about that that tension. And that's one of those funny things. Perrin, he obviously has a very keen sense of smell. We get a lot about smelling emotions, but
right, but we don't know what that really smells like.
Well, and he'll say like it's spiky or it's
Right.
very pleasant or whatever. But I guess part of the thing I was going to say is just funny to me is that we don't get a lot of description of like actual smells, even though he's supposed to have this really great sense of smell.
Sure,
He doesn't walk in and like tell you about the aroma of this particular area.
Oh man, that IU on the other side of the Glen has like terrible BO, and it's just like I can't get away from it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad in one way because knowing how Jordan tends to over describe things, it's probably for the best that
that'd be another way we could get a few more pages of nonsense.
Right, but it is just kind of funny that it's like we'll spend a long time smelling the emotions without getting a description of actual smells that like we as humans would be able to relate to.
Yeah, and like there are times when he says it is spiky, but I just want occasionally I just want to be like, it smelled of tension. It smelled like pure gasoline. I don't, something.
Do they have gasoline? I
don't know.
Of light coriander with hints of mahogany, suede, and jasmine.
Right.
I don't know. There's an enormous amount of smells in the air. So also Loyal is there, and he's worried too, because he's loyal. He's pretty much always a little bit worried.
That's what he does.
There's nothing wrong with this chapter. It's just if you're looking for advancement of the plot, there's not really anything here other than the state of things after the battle. So it's maybe more of a skim for some. If you're really just I'm wanting to get the plot in, this would actually totally be a skip. But it does have Perrin in it, and we like Perrin, so there you go. And that's the last bit I have for this episode.
We always we're glad you're here. If you enjoy what you're listening to, please leave us a rating. You can check us out on social media, podcast TSM. And until next time, when we continue the slog, Tai'Shar Manetheren.